All right. So, welcome back to For the Experience. I have here with me Matt. Is joining me, another person that I got to meet actually in a coffee place in the middle of Tel Aviv, super random. And he was nice enough to join me and be on this platform.
I'm very happy to be here. I really believe in what you're doing. And I'm very happy to share my story.
Amazing. So you can definitely go ahead and start just introducing yourself. How old are you?
I'm Matt. I'm 33 years old. I was born in the UK, but honestly, I've lived in many places throughout Europe, mainly Spain. And I've been living in Israel now for the last 5 years.
Wow. Amazing. And you got to tell me a little bit what brought you here. Some of you can also share with the platform.
It's a long story. Honestly, I was in my 20s and I was traveling. I backpacked through Israel for about a month, and I absolutely fell in love with it. There was something about the culture here, something about the people, the weather, the food as well. But honestly, there's something very real about Israelis and about Israel that's missing in Europe. So I can't put it in words. I told you before, I'm not a spiritual kind of person, but this is probably the biggest connection I've had to something that I can't describe in words ever. It's worth explaining that I'm not Jewish either.
Yeah, right? For sure. Yeah.
I ended up coming back and back and back many times. I met my ex-girlfriend, and so I moved here for her. I got a visa through her, and we just broke up recently. And I'm finding ways to stay in Israel, basically.
I also told you it's a great opportunity to see that a man came to Israel because of a girl, because I definitely heard and met a lot of girls who came to Israel because of a boy. So now we have a new story, a new perspective. So how old were you when you first came to Israel?
I think I was around 24.
24. And what brought you then?
I don't know. It's English speaking. It's exotic and different. So I kind of pointed at a map and said, I want to go
Really?
back. Yeah. It's completely random. I knew it was going to go a month.
Yeah.
The flight was long enough for me to want to spend considerable time. And I made friends instantly. Right, so I ended up staying in kibbutzim in the north. I ended up staying in kibbutzim in the south, Tel Aviv, Haifa, hitchhiking a lot, festival up north. And I remember thinking back then, right, how can I stay, right? What can I do to stay in Israel? Because this is too good to be true.
What do you mean too good to be true?
I made friends very easily. I've never felt so welcome in my life. It's extremely diverse. Everyone's young and strong and caring and
Wow. So I'm super interested to understand how you just pointed on a map. Israel, it's so small. And I don't know, like usually if I would be in your shoes, I would think, okay, Jewish people, I'm not Jewish. Like, why do I have to go there?
You know, Israel's somewhere you always read about in the news. It's interesting enough on its own, its own story.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people, Jewish or not, are interested. So on its own, it's got a very interesting story, right? It's the only Jewish country in the world. How it was founded through, Jews being persecuted and wanting to create independence from, colonial UK. And it's got a really fascinating story that just is unheard of, right? So I think it stands out on its own. And then other things too, it's very successful. It's democratic in a region that isn't democratic at all. So, it really stands out.
So you were pretty young, and then you had to leave Israel, or you stayed for a while? What was the period of time you stayed here?
Yeah, I was traveling for a while. My story is that I studied engineering, right? And I worked in engineering for a while, and I really didn't like it. I was very bored in an office in the UK. I felt very disconnected from everyone around me. So I was still young enough to just quit and go traveling and not really care about money and savings and just do what I wanted. Israel was part of my travel. After Israel, I wanted to stay. I couldn't because, you'd need to get a visa and and instead I went back to the UK and I joined the British Army because, again, I wanted something that wasn't an office job. Through the British Army, I was in the Middle East for a long period of time. Every opportunity I had, I just came back to Israel and met more people and ultimately met Shani, and we fell in love. That's the story.
So what was your very, very first impression when you came to Israel? Other than obviously making friends, but like first impression, could be feeling, could be visual.
I landed and I went straight to a festival in Yokneam, if I remember, up north.
Yeah.
So that was my first impression, and I was completely on my own. And honestly, when I arrived there tired after the flight, I thought, what am I doing? I don't know anyone here. I'm going to be that weird guy that just sits in the corner and, it kind of gives out creepy vibes because you're on your own in a festival. And that was opposite from, like, immediately walking into the festival, I already made a group of friends that I was going to, like, camp next to. And then, I go and dance and I'm immediately meeting people. And the guy at the bar buys me a shot and starts asking about my life. And that's when I immediately realized this is very different from anything I've experienced.
In what way?
I come from the UK. I grew up in Spain and I thought, okay, Spain's a very warm and welcoming country. The UK, it's a different culture, nothing against it, but it's a bit more cold and you're a bit more isolated socially for sure. So I thought Spain was probably the warmest kind of country I could imagine. But this is something else. Like, people are extremely welcoming. Everyone's looking to care for you and understand you again. So there's a metaphor I really like to use when it comes to Israel, because some Westerners that have come, some of my friends, they point out like, oh, Israelis are pretty rude, right? They're pretty direct and they're beeping all the time and they don't, they kind of push you out of the way almost.
More assertive, I would say.
Yeah, very assertive people. But the truth is they care a lot. And the metaphor I like to use is it's kind of like family, right? So if I'm going to the fridge and my little sister is standing there in front of me, I don't say to her, excuse me, miss, do you mind if good morning, how are you? I'm like, oh, well, thank you. I don't talk like that, right? I kind of just push her out of the way and say, what you do? But she's my sister. I would die for her, right? She's my family. I genuinely care about her. And that's the same for Israelis, right? In general, people really care for each other. There's no time for bullshit such as, this kind of trying to be polite and being fake with each other. So once you understand this, you realize that you have a family for life if you live in Israel. It's completely true that there are these kind of barriers, and I think they come from two places. I think they come, one, from distrusting each other. If you're in a British city and you're put in an elevator with a random person, you're not going to trust them. The attitude is kind of like, I don't like this person, what's going on? It would take a lot of time to warm up to people. Where in Israel, I think there's this instant respect and trust that people have that kind of reminds me of family, right? You can break trust, for sure. A family member can break trust. Yeah. But ultimately, if you put me in a room with a random Israeli, we're going to get along, we're going to care for each other, we're going to kind of, make sure we're okay. That's incredible. And then number two, I feel like in the West, it's getting worse and worse, but we're really disconnected from kind of reality. We're really disconnected from our feelings, and it makes it very difficult to express ourselves. Even among good friends, the level of kind of emotional maturity in Israel is so much higher, in my experience, than back in the West. So maybe this is one of the reasons too.
Some of my question definitely will not, the goal of this question is not to see necessarily why Israel is better than another country. I'm definitely interested in your point of view of life, because there is also a big question of, is Israel welcoming people that are in a point in their life where they're questioning something? Like, I feel with everything that it's being said on these interviews, seems like people are finding themselves in a way in Israel when they come here. And the way I said it, it's the fact that here in Israel, you have to face a lot of choices. The minute you have to choose, you have to look into yourself and understand what do you need. And when you do that, you have to obviously choose in your best interest. And then you start figuring out what is it that I want for myself. And this is probably our mentality. So I'm interested to understand, like, who are the people who are coming here? Like, there is probably something in their position in their life that allows them to come here and being open-minded, but also, I don't know, there is no right way to ask it.
My experience, I can only talk about my own experience. My experience with Israel is that I created a very genuine connection with this country. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it's the people more than anything else. So we have a lot of options, and Israel provides something very, very real that other countries just don't,
Do you think you need to be open-minded when you come to Israel? Are you an open-minded person?
I think everyone considers himself an open-minded person. Look, I have met people who have come to Israel and stuff like the directness we talked about before got to them.
Yeah.
Stuff like when you're in a bar and there's a young waitress working there and she doesn't suck up to you the way they would back in the West.
Okay.
You know, she'll put you in your place if you're rude immediately, you know, and she doesn't care about the tip. She'll just, you know, basically tell you to go away if you're rude. And that's something a lot of people maybe from the US or the UK aren't used to.
Okay.
So I have met people that have come and have disliked Israel for these kind of reasons. But honestly, those aren't the kind of people I like. I don't think they're particularly open-minded, to be honest. I think the little things bother them because there are inconveniences in living in Israel, for sure. Mm-hmm. Many. The conflict is very real. Mm-hmm. It's pretty expensive to live here, for sure.
So there is something I said is the fact that I think, especially in Tel Aviv, or especially me, a person who wanted to escape Israel, the mentality in Europe really, really touched me. Like, I really enjoyed it. And here, when I met a lot of people who came from outside, I definitely got to take a lot of their mentality, points of view. There is some structure, the way you think as well, the way what you think is accepted and what you think is not. Like, your boundaries are different than ours in a way. I think the people who are coming here and bringing with themselves their values, I think the way Israelis and the Israeli mentality, we observe the right things almost. It's hard for me to say that the people who are coming here affected Israel in a negative way. Mm-hmm. So I'm connected this to what you said of the people who are not staying here. It's almost like Israel will not take the people that don't bring the good into the mixture.
For sure. And it, like you say, Israel's molded as well by generations and generations and generations of extremely different people, right? You have, I have a friend who's half Yemeni, half Ukrainian.
Yeah.
I don't imagine anywhere else in the world you'd have this, right? Or at least this generation. Maybe now in Europe people are mixing and next generation. But honestly, to survive in this multicultural world, let alone this multicultural country, you need to be open-minded. And I think Israel's kind of a few generations ahead of the diversity that we're seeing in Europe.
Yeah.
So the optimistic side of me thinks that Europe is going to become more and more like this, democratic and diverse and open-minded and, straight to the point.
If I will ask you if there is a table of pros and cons of staying in Israel, what will be on each side?
This is a big discussion I'm having with myself now.
Because you need to decide.
I need to decide, and I definitely prefer to stay in Israel. And part of the reason is because I built a community here and I built my friends. And, if I leave, I'm going to regret it and I'm going to miss it phenomenally. More than I miss the UK or Spain or anywhere else.
How is it comfortable for you with knowing the struggles? Because you have mentioned it's not easy to live here. So what makes it comfortable?
That's a good question. Let me think about this for a second.
No problem.
It goes back to what we were saying before. People here genuinely care. And I have this nagging feeling that if I go back to even somewhere beautiful in Spain where I have some friends, I won't have the community that I have here in Israel.
And what is hard for you about Israel as a country?
I'd say the bureaucracy is pretty difficult. It's like you have to fight all the time. If you want to open a bank account, you have to go back again to get a checkbook.
For a high-tech country.
Back again to activate phone customer service. It's like, come on, it's stuff you'd assume, You have to haggle a lot too. Trying to find an apartment in Tel Aviv is just, you need a diploma just to do that. A diploma in finding apartments.
Yeah.
And,
But there is something about the fact that you're under challenge all the time. And you're just, you get skills constantly here. Yeah. You keep learning. It never ends. And there are a lot of moments where I found myself saying like, enough is enough. Like, I've learned enough. Yeah. I'm like, I want to settle down. But I understand that this is the country. Like, that will not change no matter how old I will be. Do you also feel like that? Like, this is the environment that you're in?
I think you're completely right. It's really on the money to say that, if I want to just relax and, stay safe somewhere where I'm not challenged, which is appealing sometimes, honestly. I've just been abroad during it's really difficult time that we're in conflict in Israel. You probably want one of the and being away from it was far more anxiety inducing than coming back to Israel the other week and being with my people that understand. I was with family and friends in Europe that are really understanding and really listen and really care for me, but they could never understand like what was happening in Israel, why I cared so much about it. And now I'm among Israelis in the thick of it. I'm feeling much more calm, and this is where I need to be. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, of course.
being in a challenging environment with the right community is better than being in a relaxed environment with the wrong community.
I mean, you feel all the support around you,
For sure.
so you
For
can
sure.
handle anything.
And I'm supporting them too,
Yes.
right? So I'm like part of the solution, you know, and it makes me feel part of something.
I definitely view everything that being said and brought into the table as your experience and your intelligence. So for me, I don't need a research to be done to accept something as truth or false. I take your perspective and your point of view as something that you bring with your experience of this part of the world and what you've experienced through it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I also view this as like 40 experience, because I truly see us as part of one big universe, and we're experiencing itself in a way. So it's super interesting how to see everyone are bringing their own part, their own point of view, their own experience in life into something we all share the same. And everyone used the same description at the end of the day, which is crazy in my opinion. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I moved here for the first time, I signed up to an ulpan, and so I met other people that were moving, mainly Olim, right?
Yeah.
Olim Chadashim, and people that are moving to Israel, and they're Jewish. Anyway, so there was a British guy in my ulpan with me, and yeah, we were talking about the same thing, like why, you know, he was settled with kids and his wife, and he uprooted everything to move to Israel when he had a very comfortable job in London, well paid, I imagine. So I asked him, you know, why would you do it? I was in my late 20s, so, you know, adventure was okay. Why would he do this? And his answer was very similar. Like, everyone's in this together in Israel. It's his chance to contribute towards a culture, not just receive and experience a culture. And that's something I love about Israel. You're part of it. So, oh, no, I forget what I was going to say, of course. So
The pros and cons.
well, I was saying only a few months ago, I was literally saying this to my family, that there's something very special about Israel. This is when I realized there was something almost even spiritual about this, that it's kind of always providing whatever I need at the time, right? In a weird way, if I need to, you know, I need a challenge at work, it will come my way. And if I needed something, where back in the West, I feel kind of lost and drifting, and I don't know what I should be doing. And I think everyone feels this way. In Israel, it's all pretty clear, and it all comes into place, and it all just makes sense like this. And this is why it feels almost spiritual to me, because it's a very real experience.
I think it's like manifesting, but I actually don't believe in manifesting, because the way someone explained it is the fact that when you think you manifest yourself, it's just that you're teaching your brain to understand what is it that you want, and then your brain now understand what it needs, and then it's easier for you to recognize the opportunities outside. So it's like you're not really manifesting; you're telling and training your brain to recognize the right things for you at the certain and that specific moment. So maybe these challenges are, you know, like, okay, I'm facing something that I have to have a better outcome. I want something like this or like that. Then you start thinking, okay, what do I need right now? The universe to send me?
Yeah.
And
right. In the military, you know what you're working towards. You know who you need to be, and you know what you need to improve, and you know, you're even measured by it, right? So it's pretty clear cut, and you have a clear purpose, and you're in a very close knit community, right? Same in Israel. There's something about the society that it makes your life very clear and very purposeful. And it doesn't have to be related to the conflict or to military, you know. It doesn't have to be related to work. it's just every little point of this society makes it very clear who you should be, who you are first, who you should be to improve, what you should do. And yeah, it's an incredibly strong experience that I recommend for anyone, for sure.
Do you think that is the connection that you can't put into words? The fact that you feel purpose?
I think that's the main one, yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it out loud until now. So. Do you no longer want to leave Israel?
There is always this question because of I want stability, but there is so much more here. Just at the end of the day, there is so much more.
I think you can create stability in Israel for sure, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know.
It's what the definition of stability is as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're looking for.
I think I don't need to. The main thing was also mentality. Like for me, Israeli people were a bit too aggressive sometimes, and I was like getting anxious. And I'm the type of person who I'm able to like soak emotions in a way, and it's almost overwhelming, especially when there was like protests in the street. I was walking in the street and I could like feel the anger, feel the sadness, feel everything. It was like draining me emotionally. And that is on a daily basis because I think we're not being cheap about like expressing our emotions on a daily basis. Like we're really real. Yeah. Like you would know how we feel and we feel comfortable showing you how we feel in a respectful and not respectful way. But I got to be in Tel Aviv in a place where so many people from all over the world. And like God or whatever made it easy for me. I don't have to go far away to find it. And I have the variety of mentality that I need right here. So there is more pros and cons for me to leave right now, for sure. Not on my agenda at the moment. And starting this, like, how can I do it if I leave?
It's really cool. So 2 people I met recently on the flight back to Israel from Europe only a couple of weeks ago. I met a guy who his father's Jewish, but honestly, they're not even traditional. They don't do Jewish traditions. So he doesn't feel much connection to Judaism at all. But with everything happening in the news, he just decided he wanted to help. So he's now volunteering and helping the IDF.
Cool.
And this guy's in his 40s with a family, a really good job, you know, and he decides to take 2 weeks to come to Israel and do this. I'm going to meet him again this weekend. When people talk about Israel, they talk from such a more like a deeper level of connection to Israel. And I've never seen that anywhere else.
How do you explain the fact that people are using the same terms, same descriptions, but still, and I hope to make a section out of it in this platform. When I ask, like, towards the end or after we talk enough, if you put it into one word, everyone uses a different word. The description is the exact same. The word each person chooses to use, huge difference.
So I think you're looking for a paradox here because
yes.
What we love about Israel, we can't describe. We know this. That's why we love yes. Israel. We can't describe it. So you're looking to describe something that by nature we can't describe.
Right.
Because it goes beyond a list. It goes beyond human kind of, explanation. There's a collection of things, whether you're spiritual, religious, or none of the above, like me. I don't consider myself to be, religious for sure, spiritual either. But I know there are limitations to the human understanding of our environment. And I think Israel is an example of something that goes beyond that, right? So you can't just sit down and make a list of pros and cons about Israel. I think what's bothered me the most abroad is people's perceptions of Israel. So even like level-headed friends of mine who are open-minded and listening, a lot of them still have a very negative impression of Israel. We could talk about the reasons for sure. There's a lot of propaganda out there that even reaches mainstream media and mainstream organizations that seem to be pretty convinced that Israel is not a nice place. What's extremely frustrating is how that's very not true. When you experience Israel, you immediately go, wait, this isn't, what it's been described to be. And the reason I'm confident in using the word propaganda, which is quite a controversial word to use, is because most of the arguments I hear my friends back at home say against Israel just simply aren't true, right? It's something that if you came to Israel for a single week, you'd see with your own eyes isn't really the truth, right? So I think that's the most frustrating part of it for me is.
But how do you explain? Like, it takes me back to the sentence I said about being human being and recognizing the existence of someone else. It's hard for me to even think of explanation or reasonable reason for me to not get information as truth or not listening to the people who are here, like experiencing the country. Like, and you're saying their information is not even true, like based on what?
Yeah.
So what do you think people are relying on? What do you think keeps people in that mindset?
I think there's a lot of political agendas out there that's anti-Israel for many different reasons, and we can go into detail. But the truth is, it's a very successful long-term campaign to kind of say Israel shouldn't exist, and it comes from very deep, dark places of anti-Semitism, I'm pretty sure, and it also then it trickles to the West in the form of misunderstanding. I think. I don't think the West particularly understands the world too well, or the Middle East too well in particular. And so it's absolutely fine in the West to kind of criticize your own government and to even take that to extremes and say, you know what, I think, people in the US might say that the US shouldn't even exist. And it's okay for them to say this because it's not really realistic, right? That's not going to happen. The country's pretty, stable and strong, where Israel is being threatened consistently since its creation, since before its creation. Israel's existence has been up for grabs, and therefore we don't have the luxury to kind of say, oh, maybe Israel shouldn't exist because that means something very dire for us living in Israel.
I think, and I'm actually finding out, like, at this moment, I think probably why I like asking this question about why Israel at this time and choosing this niche during this time, it's because I believe that the fact that someone shares an experience and an emotional connection, the other person on the other side that will listen. And I'm wondering to myself, what is this soft spot in these people? Because it's generation on generations that were taught to believe in something, and I don't blame people for that. We as kids grow up to accept truth as truth. We start asking the questions when we want to ask those questions because someone showed us differently. So who are we and what are we going to show people outside that will make them start questioning?
I think fortunately there is the bulk of people, I would even say, even in this region across the Middle East, I think the bulk of people don't actually care that much, right? They're open-minded enough, in the West for sure, that they're open-minded enough to ask me questions. And I'm pretty confident when I say one side of it is propaganda, because I know as a fact that if these people spent a week in Israel, they would immediately dispel most of their arguments and most of their beliefs.
Okay, so 5 years later, you're still here. You're questioning if living or not. What have you gained? What have you learned about yourself?
So I can say very confidently that the 5 years I've been living in Israel, I've developed and I've improved as a person more than, throughout maybe 10 or 15 years, or maybe the rest of my life put together. I'm always excited to go back home to show people kind of who I've become, much more emotionally mature, much more confident in myself. I know what I want more. I understand what's important. I know how to deal with people much better. I know when not to care. When someone in the street seems to want to start a fight, I know that it's not important anymore. I just walk away, very Israeli style. When my sister has a problem, I know with confidence, I should do everything I'm doing and helping her.
Wow.
So it really made me a better us in many ways. And it would be interesting to have an alternative universe and see the hypothetical Matt that had stayed in Spain.
Yeah.
And compare myself to myself now that I'm 33 and see if this is because of Israel or just because I've matured in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think these have been very important years for me. I'm pretty confident that Israel's provided a lot of this direction. Yeah.
If I ask you for one value, big value that you've learned during this time here, one.
I mean, I want to say purpose again, but I guess it's a bit of a cheat. It's a bit of a cheat because it just kind of compromises, it puts together everything. I would say confidence. It's made me very confident. Yeah.
I think this is it, unless you want to say anything.
Well, that's it. I think I've said everything and more. There is one thing else we could talk about that I've talked
Yes,
about
please.
elsewhere. I mean, again, this is. I'm just gathering my thoughts, right? So this is
the place.
This is off the record, I guess. But so I've had military experience in campaigns in Central America and training with different NATO outfits and also in the Middle East in different kind of forms. And I've also trained and operated alongside different NATO outfits, some of them considered to be, the most restrained and civilized kind of outfits in the world. And I can say very confidently that in spite of what you hear about this conflict, about how, the demonization of the IDF, someone with military experience can see that the IDF does more than any other of these militaries do in order to prevent civilian casualties and to fight this war in a moral way. And look, it's not above criticism. There's loads we could discuss.
For sure.
Things that need to improve in Israel, things that need to improve in the IDF, how the conflict's been handled badly.
Yes.
And there are racist elements or let's say evil elements within Israel for sure. But the truth is that as a majority, how can I put this? But overall, what I like about it is that it helps me understand this conflict in general, right? I've seen the propaganda before. I've seen, terrorism before. And I've seen how democratic militaries respond or should respond. And I can say pretty confidently that I support the way the IDF behaves itself and it's completely normal.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's not beyond criticism for sure, but it's not.
No, of course. Amazing. Well, thank you, first of all,
Thank you very much.
so
I really enjoyed
much.
this. Cool.
And I hope you get to hear some of our episode as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited for you to edit this. It's
a lot of work
you can
to
actually
do.
hear me, yeah.
Yeah, I hope.